Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Terra Third Thursday webinars. We've got an exciting program for you today, which has already been full of high drama with technology issues. But as always, we assume that you guys are going to have the same problems that we did. So we're going to wait about 2 minutes before we get started. So while we do that, while we're waiting for everybody to log on, make sure everything works, end their calls that they were on before, I'm going to go ahead and start and play a little, 2-minute video from our friends here at RGX, kind of giving a little overview of what they're all about. So hang on just a minute and see if we can't get this to work.
The world of electronics is rapidly changing. Yesterday's must-have technology is quickly becoming a dust collector, leading to a team of IT assets needing to be properly disposed of. Imagine you lead a small department tasked with asset disposal for a large enterprise with hundreds or even thousands of locations across the country, all producing frequent and high volumes of electronic waste reusable items. Your goal is to maximize the return on investment for the company, but you're forced to choose between two options, neither of which is optimal. A local recycling solution is good for shipping costs and the environment, but onboarding recyclers in every location takes months of vetting, months of approvals. Managing those vendors would bury your small team in paperwork. A regional solution utilizing one recycler with a handful of locations is easier to manage, but results in large loads of equipment being shipped entry, resulting in excessive shipping expenses and CO2 emissions. This local recycling option would not end well for you or your employees, so you go with the regional model. Now imagine that you're a local e-waste recycler. You've worked hard to build a facility certified to align with the highest industry standards, protecting your worker safety, the environment, and your customers' data, all while boosting your local economy. You would love to get your hands on this material, but you cannot even get an email or phone call return from most large corporations, even those driving material right past your facility and out of state. Recycle Global Exchange, or RGX, solves the enterprise IT asset disposition dilemma. Through the RGX platform, our team of e-waste specialists onboard and manage a vast pool of recyclers nationwide, automating transactions, centralizing certifications, and processing financial transactions. For our enterprise customers, this means onboarding one company, RGX, which then gives access to hundreds of localized solutions. No more regional recyclers, less emissions, less logistics, less hassle. For recyclers, RGX is signing the contract with the enterprise, bringing their equipment to the platform and in turn to you. Vendors can now access equipment that they would never have had the opportunity to process before. RGX knows that working together, we can all win together and do better for our business ROI, for local economies, and for the environment.
All right, love it, guys. So everybody, that'll hopefully give you a quick overview what RGX is all about. They got a very exciting program for us today. We're going to be talking about all things logistics. So I'm going to let Sean and Rich introduce themselves here in just a moment. I do have a couple of just Terra-related kind of updates to provide. Let's see if I can get the presentation kind of geared up for when I finish. I just turn it over to them. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And we'll go full screen with that here in just a moment. All right, well, I can no longer see myself. I'm hoping you can all see the presentation. Another little quirk of this software. So again, just a couple quick announcements about Terra before I pass it off to Sean and Rich. First and foremost, kind of the big thing that we wanted to announce, we talked about it with a lot of our members at ITAD. As you all know, we were kind of looking at 2025 as being the year that we were going to launch our Terra conference. And we're still very excited about doing this, but really the idea behind it was based on the fact that there was just a lot of turmoil in the industry as it related to some of our conferences. Some things happened around e-scrap, and then the e-scrap and e-reuse people separated and became two different shows. So, we thought we could be helpful in creating something that was off season, that was, really focused on business and brought our members together. But as we got deeper into it and had difficulty finding a location here in our hometown of Nashville, and B, the fact that there was a lot of movement and changes going on that looked positive. The ITAT summit was fabulous. They did a fantastic job. We're hearing some good reports coming out of the sustainability summit. So we just kind of let the industry kind of see what's happening and kind of go through this year before we start, muddling it up. We just want to make sure that, we wanted to be additive, not subtract from what's going on in the industry. So we're just going to keep our embers warm until 2026 potentially. So that's a big change for us. And the other piece is, we're looking to, explore in this format a little bit differently as we start moving forward. As you all know, you guys are all on listen only mode and you can ask questions through the app, but that's a little bit clunky. We want to figure out a way to get more interactive with this. So that's one of the things that's kind of on our hot to-do list here going forward. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Sean and Rich to take the reins and tell us a little bit about reverse logistics.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. It's great to be back. Love having chats with you. I brought my good buddy Rich Bulger here. Steve, real quick, I think you have the other screen sharing in terms of the view so that the team can actually see the slides better. Just a little tweak.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can get that fixed.
It's good to start with breaking the ice. We're all in technology, but yet we can't even figure out how technology works sometimes when we need it to. So I think that's a great way to start this conversation.
Yeah. You know what? I'm afraid that I can't fix that problem. So I think we just have to have a little bit smaller screen.
No, that's fine. I mean, the point of the discussion today is really just talking about how circularity is becoming a known word in the industry. You hear sustainability, you hear ESG, you hear carbon reduction, you hear all of this reverse logistics. I come from a world, personally, I've been in the industry for almost 25 years. I cut my teeth basically selling used market material. And in that, you learn about testing, you learn every type of material that's coming through there, whether it's network, telco, infrastructure, mobility. And, I wanted to get out of that because I saw a need for automation. I mean, dealing with Fortune 500 companies even that are working on emails, spreadsheets, and phone calls, and you're limited on that capacity. And how many people can I touch? How many jobs can I manage at once? How much volume can I actually overlook and see that's being processed? So being in our tenure of basically 25 years of doing this, we saw the niche for automation. And that really falls into a marketplace where how can we bring people like yourself that are on this webinar, if you're a vendor that's processing material, and how can I bring options to customers that might be on this webinar saying, hey, now I have a way to go into something and look at how can I find the best way to dispose of this, make sure that I'm covering myself, that I'm not going to get knocked on the door by the EPA or 60 minutes. I'm going to make sure that it's going in the right direction. I'm going to make sure that I'm not getting yelled at by my consumer protection of data security. And I'm also going to try, and obviously in every business, it's like, how do I get the best ROI? So that's really how we came up with the RGX solution, is to try and cover those 3 bullet points, localize it, good ROI, and reduce the environmental impact. The reason why Rich is here is because he's done this in the background, and I'll let him introduce himself. But, the goal is, how do we bring this? There's actually ways to do this. He's got the book here. How can we reduce the impact, but increase it and show that there is actually revenue and there is ROI when you look at the reverse model? Everything's always looking at forward. How do we look at the back of it? And that's where our software comes in. And with the collaboration with Rich, we find a solution that I think is very impactful. Rich, do you want to go ahead and say hi?
Yeah, you bet. If you want to move on to the next slide, just a little bit of background about me, and hello to our community. Glad to be here. Good to meet a lot of you at the ITAT Summit. I made a lot of new friends, different pools that I was swimming in there. New faces are always fun. But a little bit of background about me. Army at 17, joined Verizon, since 17 years there. In 2009, I became the youngest director of Verizon over operations and marketing after beginning my career and spending it in retail, trying to sell product. In 2010, I started Verizon's very first retail trade-in program as a 2-district pilot, which has become a catalyst for a lot of the source of mobile supply that's in the market right now, that's catapulted the circular economy in amazing ways. After proving the pilot and growing market share to over 60%, I was asked to move to Fort Worth, Texas to run Verizon centralized returns and testing center. So I got to push 15 million devices through a world-class automated and robotic process. I spent 2 years running the monetization team after the trading program had broken $1 billion in revenue. I was spending 300 million a year running my operation, and I was challenged to grow revenues by 300 million in 12 months, and we did. In this space, as you guys know, there's 3 things you do to grow the business: get more product, process it more efficiently, and generate more value. So after 17 years, I had a chance to retire from Verizon, and there was a ton of opportunities because there's not a lot of people that can do circular logistics at scale. So I went to Cisco after Verizon, not because Cisco was the highest paying job. It was actually the hardest job that was there. Cisco was primarily B2B selling. Verizon was primarily B2C selling. It was a different category set. Networking and computing is different than mobility. I got to do international reverse logistics, running plants in the Netherlands, Hong Kong, Japan, here in the U.S., and 12 places to help me shepherd product across borders. We won 3 Gartner Supply Chain Awards at Cisco. I ran a portion of the CEO's pledge that he made at the World Economic Forum in Davos, that Cisco would take back 100% of customers' used products from anyone, anywhere, at no charge. That pledge actually drew me to Cisco because I wanted to be part of something great, and that sounded like a lot of executive support to go through and do the right thing. But what I realized, running a very small team, because all these teams are small, and trying to go through and execute a global pickup program, it was impossible to talk to all the vendors. When I met Sean and I learned about the circular platform that they had to match used, unwanted gear, sometimes you don't even know what it is, with ITAD recyclers that can go through and either scrap it if that's the direction or monetize it if that's the direction, that circular platform was critical. He was singing my song at Verizon and at Cisco. But after 3.5 years at Cisco, I moved in. I took over as CEO for a company that played in the secondary market, matching used supply with used demand, moving about 50,000 devices a month. After 2 years of CEO at that company, I moved away, and I wrote a book called Going Circular, The Evolution of Reverse Logistics into a Competitive Weapon. I've been speaking all over the world, doing master classes, and I've partnered up and made some really good friends with people like Sean at RGX, and I'm trying to go through, spread the gospel, and make an impact.
Fabulous. Yeah, that's one thing I think that, Sean, we've talked about this often, just that has drawn our 2 organizations together, is that commitment to certification, to being transparent and sustainable, and then the first R in Terra, reuse first. So I think what you guys are putting together is really revolutionary for the industry, and I'm proud to have you guys be our hosts today.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, a little bit, I've kind of gave you some background about my upcoming and cutting my teeth in the industry. I've worked for carriers. I've worked for small companies that have become billion-dollar companies, global operations. My co-founder, Paul, him and I did a webinar. If some of you were on here before, we did about how we can just win together. Paul and I were a great yin and yang. I was always selling something and he was trying to find a way to execute it, and we were keeping each other in check. And we took that kind of methodology into building RGX, because if you're a certified recycler or even just a vendor that does ITAD, you probably either talk to Paul or somebody directly on our team, on the ops, being part of our team, and getting you onboarded, understanding how the system works. And then I'm always trying to bring the Rolodex of clients in that need to have these options, so we can make sure that we're connecting to you. And this is where we aligned with Terra very well, is because the whole mission of just trying to certification matters, making sure that the material gets handled correctly. Like Rich said, you optimizing on the value, you're reducing the environmental impact, but how do we just kind of do better? And one of the things that I always like to say in our last webinar is we can all win together. There's so much material out there, and you probably see it plastered all over social media. Only 13 to 15% of this is certified recycling. And it's projected to be the biggest waste stream in the world is electronics. that everybody, I mean, there's gaps of areas where people need to, in geographical areas where there's not even a certified vendor. So there's opportunity to enter the market right away. There's opportunity to maximize and earn ROI and be a part of something that we're all doing, is saying, let's just do better in terms of helping out and actually putting money in our pocket too. So I think it's a win-win.
Exactly.
So let's go into the talk about the circular economy. I mean, this is how these two worlds come together, with Rich's perspective on the circularity, and then how our marketplace with RGX comes together. And with Steve and Tara, it's just promoting the whole thing and bringing the members in. So I think we have a really solid panel here. If we were sitting on a stage, it'd be great. But we've got this fun go-to meeting technology.
Yeah, next time we're going to do this live.
That's right.
In person.
There'll be a stage at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that's right. So Rich, why don't you go ahead and talk about the linear supply chain?
Yeah, so one of the realizations that I had when I served on the advisory board of the Reverse Logistics Association was everyone got into this industry the way that I did. They were pulled in from different parts of the business. I came from marketing. Some come from finance, some come from procurement. But reverse logistics is a understood part of business. There's only one college on the planet that I found that had a course on reverse logistics. The American Public University Systems. I finished a master's degree in that program, but most of us go through and shadow with someone, and you hope that person is good. So my Army truck driver brain tried to go through and take some complicated processes, put them in order, and that was the foundation for the book, Going Circular, The Evolution of Reverse Logistics, into a competitive weapon. But whenever I found myself at a party or on a plane telling people what I do, whenever you say reverse logistics, eyes kind of glaze over. Well, what is that? Your typical linear supply chain makes sense for people that are consuming, for logistics. Make, distribute, sell to customer, for logistics moves to the point of use. I explain it like if you ever bought anything from Amazon, that process of getting it to you is for logistics. But if you've ever returned something, what happens then? Because after it leaves you, it becomes kind of invisible. So reverse logistics is moving away from the point of use. So your typical linear return process, which was viewed as a necessary evil, was taking the product from the customer and moving it back to the source. And companies don't like doing that. It's a huge revenue drag. It's a cost drag. So you make it easy to get to a customer. You make it hard to get from a customer. But the linear sales channel fostered an environment for linear return. And this environment is now a barrier to the circular economy because there's a lot of legacy practices that are still in force. If you move on to the next slide. So, like I said, logistics is movement from point to point, forward to the point, reverse from the point. There's a lot of things in the center of the Venn diagram. Both forward and reverse have warehouses, they have tools, they have systems, they have processes, they have transportation. But the composition of products, and those of us in the ITED space know that things going to the source are clean, in one condition, packaged the same way, optimized. But when things come back, they could be in box, they could be out of box. You could be expecting one thing and get three things that are completely different. So the processes to leverage and wield warehouses, tools, transportation, shelving are different from forward to reverse. But the essence is movement. You move on to the next slide. When I talk about the impact of linear returns, the National Retail Federation at the RLA show earlier this year shared some statistics that correlate the need to go through and develop a circular logistics solution. In the U.S., retail generated $5.13 trillion in 2023. The impact of linear returns, unwanted returns, cost almost $750 billion in revenue reversal, primarily fueled by a change in customer shopping behavior, moving from buying in stores where you can touch and feel things to purchasing online, to where you have to, in order to try 3 sizes, you buy 3 and return 2. So there's a massive amount of upwards pressure as return rates have increased
That's absolutely
And
incredible. I mean, how can I mean, what would that even like stack up to? $743 billion. I mean, that's probably like it would make it like the 50th largest GDP in the world.
oh yeah, yeah, totally agree. And if you've ever been to some of the return centers at scale, where you see all of these things coming back, like GoTierG processes returns for major big box retailers that you all know and multiple at the same time, seeing the amount of product that's coming back, a lot of it unopened, opened, is a massive challenge, and a growing part of pressure on companies' supply chains. In
Amazing.
addition to that, you've got this phenomenon now where technology, circular platforms have made it so easy to match used supply with used demand that customers are able to go through if a carrier or a brand or a distributor isn't offering a value for their returns. If they say, no, we won't take it back, or no, we won't buy it back, customers are smart and they will find each other to sell through a variety of marketplaces. My definition of a true circular economy is movement of an item from one owner to the next. And in that instance, you can assume that the two most successful circular economies on the planet are real estate and automotive. But no one considers those circular. It's just the value of your old apartment, you expect someone else to buy it, and you expect to apply that value to the next thing that you buy. Now, with technology, it's much, much easier to go through and match used products to a person that wants them, regardless of vertical. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go through and you combine the combined value of unwanted returns that require reverse logistics skills with the combined benefit of this growing secondary market, which also require reverse logistics skills, you're looking at almost a 30% impact to a company's bottom line that could be managed through an understanding of circular logistics. So pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah.
This is one example. Okay.
No, you're good,
Sorry,
buddy.
Steve. Yep.
Oh, fashion? Is that where you want me to be?
Yep. Fashion's a good place to be. It's very interesting now. Over 40% of Gen Z and millennials are checking the resale value of their clothing before they even buy it. One of the combats to fast fashion is going to be recirculating better quality garments. There was a study that was just done on the screen that showed that the growth in the secondary market of clothing is growing 3 times faster than the sale of new products. So that's just an indication, and you pick different verticals: home goods, automotive, e-commerce, electronics. They're all growing in the same type of way.
It's interesting as I've been reading your book here, I definitely can see that you have a marketing brain because you're really talking about, kind of positioning and the branding and really the expectation of this next generation, this Gen Z, these millennials, is that this is what they expect. So if these brands don't start delivering on these promises, they're going to find other brands that do.
That's exactly right.
You got it.
I was in a conference in Amsterdam last year, and there was a very bright young man that was on. He had engineered a creative way to go through and charging stations for vehicles, and he was on a panel, and clearly he was the youngest person in the room. There was a lot of people with a lot of silver in their beards and hair, like me, and they were CEOs that have been wildly successful for a long time. And when the moderator asked him a question about his preference for buying things and what he'd like to see, the response that he had was, I would love to see not only the price of the food that I'm buying at the store, but what is the carbon impact of this item. He goes, because he was willing to pay more for a product if it had a lower impact out of a sense of duty.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said that, what stood out to me was this audible, eye-rolling of these people thinking this young man was an idiot for how he felt. But if you look at the buying desires and the employment desires of Gen Z and millennials, they're motivated by different things. And
Yep.
if companies right now that are primarily run by the boomer generation and by Gen Xers like me, the top spending demographic right now is Gen X. And that's quickly going to be millennials followed by Gen Z. So if companies aren't proactively marketing to how that generation chooses to buy, then they're going to get displaced. It's why people fall off the Fortune 500 all the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, if you move on. So when I wrote the book, there was 4 desired outcomes that I saw in every company I worked for. There was a desire to drive sales. One of the first satisfaction guarantees was in the 1890s by Montgomery Ward, a mail order salesman, who offered people the ability to return anything that they didn't want. And he did it so he could sell more things. Warranties, the first Model Ts that rolled off the assembly line from Ford, they had peat moss seats and the moss had bugs in it, chiggers. So the first automobiles got recalled to take the bugs out of the seats. True story. But warranties were designed to give people confidence to buy things. So when people are making these promises, returns just started happening, which led to the second desired outcome, which is driving down unwanted returns and correlating expense. The third, about 20 plus years ago, green logistics started to matriculate. How do you move things and minimize harm? And now there's a strong desire with the circular economy to go through and drive some returns up. And that's a change for a lot of businesses that have built protocols and teams to go through and drive returns down. Changing the linear model to a circular model where you're giving value for things instead of trying to prevent is a goal of the successful companies that are doing this. If you move forward, I started using a concept called circular logistics. The reason why I'm talking about circular logistics instead of reverse logistics is because reverse logistics causes people's eyes to glaze over. Circular logistics has a close correlation with the circular economy, and it evokes an emotional response. People seem to get circular logistics more than they get forward and reverse. There also builds in a sense of purpose with the circularity message. If you move forward, the reason why right now, and we kind of talked about it, 78% of millennials, 80% of Gen Z bought something used last year. Over 40% of Fortune 500 companies, and they publicly stated ESG goals by the year 2030, and a lot of them haven't gotten started. Companies, customers, employees are increasing their demand. So there's time for a change right now. And move forward, this situation and aligning events started this concept of circular logistics with a sales model. When I started Cisco, this was the first thing I saw my first day at Cisco. And as a marketing guy, I liked it. You have a customer in the middle, you have a racetrack, you want to try to get the customer to go from the first product to the second product as fast as you possibly can. And then once they're in the second product, you want to get them in the third product and keep them on a continuous infinity loop with the customer being the center and the motivation getting them from tech 1 to tech 2 or product 1 to product 2 or 3, 4. So when I started advocating within Cisco about the need for sustainability and circularity, I wanted to speak Cisconian, which helped me create the next slide, which is what I call the product lifecycle loop and the circular logistics model, where companies now need to go through and develop products and services for customer 1 and customer 2, 3, and 4. If you buy a car that's 5 years old, you might not need a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty on it. You might need 90 days famous cash with the ability to buy a 2 or 3 year warranty. So the price points and motivations, how people buy when they're customer 2, 3, or 4 are completely different. So this model the circular logistics model was formulated of the concept of helping develop sales and using four logistics, the arrows pointing to the right, to get product to the point of use. And then when the product is no longer desired, they don't like it, it's a warranty claim, it's end of life, then you've got to have methodologies to initiate a return to get the product back to a reverse center, moving away from the target. There's an analysis. If the cost to reuse is greater than the blended benefit, well, then keep it on the racetrack and get it to customer 2, 3, 4, whenever that situation is available. But if the cost to reuse is less than the blended benefit, that's when you want to responsibly recycle the product so the components can be used by other organizations to make the next thing. So in a modern world, leaders now need to be able to go through and develop concepts to get the customer from product 1 to product 2, and they need to have sales and marketing models and logistical support to move the product to the point, from the point, and to another point. It's a different way of business leadership right now.
So, one of the things, because, Tara's got our program done with it, and we're out there trying to get people like our headset manufacturer partner, Avid, to send material back in. But I found personally a lot of challenge in that, sustainability people have one goal, sales and marketing have a different goal. Do you see that there needs to be a fundamental realignment of how companies approach this, or are you seeing that it's starting to happen in the marketplace?
No, 100%. When I first started going through and developing the 4 desired outcomes of reverse, your sales enablement is driven by the sales and marketing team to try to go through and increase market share. They have a completely different leadership structure, P&L, scorecard than the reverse logistics professionals that needed to go through and drive down costs. Grain logistics is often run by a different reporting group within a company. Sometimes the migration to go through and adopt a new technology increases the cost. And then circular returns, understanding the secondary market. At Verizon, it was run by supply chain instead of marketing, the people who knew what the auction market and the secondary market were. So you've got these companies, and they all have different care abouts, different culture, different capabilities. Some of those desired outcomes complement, some conflict, but I believe that it's people in our chairs that need to understand what companies want to do, and supply chain professionals now need to influence. They need to know the numbers. They need to be persuasive. They need to understand the bigger picture and help their organizations adapt, because no one has the vantage point that we do right now.
Yeah, good point.
So when I went through and wrote this book, I got connected with Peter Evans from McFadden Digital, an expert on circular platforms. And there is a realization that all of these different marketplaces that match used supply with used demand are one piece of the puzzle, but before you can put something online and be successful, you have to understand how it looks, how it functions, and you need reverse logistics capabilities to get this back. When I met Sean and I've watched the same video that we started with, light bulbs went off for me about the power of the RGX circular platform in particular. So I want to turn it over to my battle buddy, Sean, and have him tell you a little bit more about RGX.
No, I appreciate it, Rich. I mean, you've actually kind of educated me. When we first start the premise of RGX, Paul and I, the founder, we were like, hey, there's just a niche in the industry for automation. There's a lot of vendors out there that are being looked over when they could help right there. Let's bring that to it and find a way to monetize this. We kind of fell into the fact that there was a sustainability play. And then all of a sudden there's all these different kind of perceptions and tag words, and we've gone as a platform, we've gone as a SaaS solution, we've gone as a clean tech solution, because basically what we're doing is we're finding ways to reduce environmental impact, and that was just an output result of having a local vendor take something instead of a customer shipping it 5 states over to have it disposed of by maybe 1 or 2 vendors that they've worked in supply chain on. So the goal, like we talked about, really the message is our platform is to give options to a client is who has the e-waste or the disposal needs, match them up with options for certified vendors that are in their market to bid on that material either by pound or all in, and have them connect and do the transaction through our system. So everything from the beginning of the loading the material, what is it that I want to get rid of, putting it out there for a vendor to buy or make a purchase on, then to the closeout of, is there a certificate of data destruction that needs to be done? Is there a certificate of disposal? How much weight was there? What's the commodity breakdown? What's the payout? The cool thing about our marketplace is that not everything is the same. It's not always going to be an ROI. Sometimes you have to pay to get stuff disposed of. I mean, I could bring up CRT monitors just right off the top of my head. Everybody should know that there's no return on that. And in fact, because of the environmental impact, you have to pay to get those disposed of. So I don't want to hear about anybody that's throwing those in the dumpster because it's bad. But if you move on to the next slide, what we try to do is make sure that a client and a vendor both can connect and find the best outcome. So what was the dilemma we ran into? When you're working with the Fortune 500s like Rich was in with the Verizon or the Cisco or other manufacturing companies, you have 2 ways you can go. You can go with a local model, which is 100 vendors being able to work with them, but you're going to have high vendor management. So if you have a team internal that's managing all those suppliers, that's great. But if your team is down to only a few people, there's no way that you can talk to them all the time. You can manage the follow-up. You can make sure they're doing the right thing, the reporting, the payouts, all of that is there. So what do most of the big companies do? They go with the regional model because they know that, okay, I got 4 or 5 vendors across the US. I'll just ship them all over whenever I need something. But that obviously is going to have a high cost of transportation and a high environmental impact, but the management of the vendors is low. So those are the 2 dilemmas. If you go to the next slide, Steve, that's how RGX came together, is because we're seeing that even in the big companies, they're shipping it 5 states over. So, and again, like you were saying, Rich, you have departments in supply chain and you have departments in maybe investment recovery or transportation and logistics, and those departments were never talking. So you might have somebody raising their hand in the investment recovery saying, I got 50 cents a pound for this material, or I got $10,000 for it. But the transportation bill would come in and say, I just spent $12,000 to ship that over to that vendor. So actually, I'm a net of the aggregate, showing that I lost money because I incurred so much transportation, even though I got a high return of the material. So what do we want to do? Have that person that's only 10 miles away or 50 miles away pick it up for less than a few $100 and give a good return, rather than and get that savings in there, plus the automation, so you're reducing your overhead cost. When those things come together, you see an aggregate of a winning solution. So maybe the person local might be giving 40 cents a pound as what they're used to getting 50 cents a pound, but you might have just saved $5,000 in transportation. And if you had 10 jobs working at the same time, you might have been able to do all 10 jobs within that local market with only a few vendors and manage it through one screen. So your overhead has been reduced because now you've got automation going. You're not sending an email out to every single person. You're not doing a spreadsheet and a phone call to follow up. Where's my material? Where's the closeout package? So that's how we kind of came to this. If you go to the next slide, Steve, that's why the marketplace was created. So we do refer to it as a marketplace because technically it's 2 parties coming on here to transact, right? Our goal is to promote the vendors that are certified. That's why we're aligned with Terra, is that certification matters. You spent the time and the money to get your site certified. You're doing the right thing. We want to promote you. You're our asset on the marketplace. And the customers, they need to have options as opposed to just the regional manager or the regional vendor to go to say, okay, I can do this in a local manner and get something done. So that's why it's the best of both worlds. You get to optimize your return, you get to measure it, you have document storage in case an audit comes up. We store things for up to 7 years, so that if a customer is, hey, what happened with this piece of material, you can go back in the vault and find it in case they ever had an audit come down. So it's recycling. There's going to be a resale component because sometimes people can maximize the value of harvesting or another life like we're talking about. But if not, make sure it gets in the proper streams for disposal and not ends up on, like I said, a river or a third world country or something like that. Go ahead and keep going, Steve.
Sure.
And if you haven't been on the marketplace, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly just to be cognizant of time. But some of the features are we're trying to bring transparency, what was always known as the gray market. You know, it's if you're doing the right thing and you're paying out so that you can give a return to the customer, but also keep your lights on and make money, it's a win solution. So the customer is going to get transparent bids. They're anonymous. Once they pick the criteria that they like, that's when we match them with the vendor, and the vendor and the customer do the transaction. And then at the back end, when the vendor's ready to close out, they come through us with the material, the reporting, and the payout, and we give that to the customer and store the material, documentation, job details.
Yeah,
And one of the
y'all make it very seamless, and it's very easy. I mean, we did. I think our last webinar we tried to do how you signed up for it, and it went a little wonky because, of course, technology is technology. But getting on the platform is actually very simple. You guys done a great job with that.
I appreciate it. That's actually the feedback we've gotten is that we've tried to, I live by the KISS method, everybody. I keep it simple, stupid. It's like, how can I get on there? How can I load a job within less than a few minutes? How can I make sure that I'm getting my job taken care of, that I got making sure I'm staying in compliance, I'm winning, I'm getting an ROI? That's what this whole process does. This is an example of just how the job closes out. So once the vendors receive the material, they've gone through it, they've removed any data security on there on the devices, found extra commodities or items that they can increase their value on. They come back and they say, okay, here's the value of the material. Here's what I can pay for it. Here's your certificates. 9 out of 10 times, the customer is going to approve it. If they need something else in the reporting or something else, they'll come back and say, hey, can you give me that? And they'll close out the job. That's how it's that easy when you're doing it. We're probably averaging about 40 to 60 jobs in the market daily, and we've got about almost 100 customers on our system that have tried it out. So we've gotten over the hump of saying there's a market fit here. We've got vendors that are loyal that are saying, yeah, I mean, I'm on their system and I'm bringing them opportunities that they hadn't seen before. They're getting access to clients that they could never get through past supply chain. So why is this not a good solution? I'm still waiting for that answer, you know? So I want to go back to this slide, and Rich, if you want to jump in too, but this is why I love this infinity symbol, because RGX is loving where we are, and that's that off ramp right there. Because if you've gone through this infinity and you've optimized the reuse capability for your product, that's when you need to make sure it gets disposed of correctly, and that's where we come in and say, okay, it's gone through the cycles, there's no more value, or there's very little value, let's make sure it's disposed of correctly. And that's where we come in with our marketplace to make sure that it's handled correctly. You get to optimize it, you can reduce the impact, all in one solution.
And it's all above board, certified. Everybody involved is a certified player. It's makes good sense.
Yeah, if you take a look at this, the RGX platform is what I've learned to call an exchange marketplace, where you're not selling product from a user to someone that's going to buy to sell to another one. You're matching the supplier with the entity that needs it directly. So RGX takes no possession of the equipment at any time, and they're not doing any of the reverse operation processing. So, which is why you don't see RGX on the reverse operation to assess functional and cosmetic, but you do see them with value generation for the equipment that they do permit to be able to be sold again. The platform allows for recycling. It allows for a true up if the value of the product is more than just scrap. The receiving entity has a chance to say, hey, instead of recycling it, I'll buy it for this amount, and it enables the product to stay intact. But the partners that we have, this platform matches people who have a lot of highly complex IT assets, electronic waste, or equipment with 400 plus local recyclers that have demand for it. So when an alert goes out, it's like first mover, like you're trying to go through and be the first at a garage sale to try to get the best things. There's a demand out, so the marketplace is very active, which is great.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate that. I think that comes up on the last slides. I mean, let's promote the book that Rich wrote. It's an awesome book. If you haven't read it, or if you have people on your team I honestly recommend it because it's actually kind of like a navigational tool. It gets you up to speed on what the purpose of circularity is and how you can weaponize it, like Rich said, and how you can actually make it a monetary vertical revenue stream.
And this is coming. I mean, that the next generation, it may not be the Gen X's to figure this out, but Gen Z and the rest of them, you know, they're going to demand this of OEMs and you know, and of us. So this is definitely a future that we're going to have to contend with. A positive
This is
future.
that I wish I would have had when I first got into it. And some of my favorite feedback that I've got from it is people saying, "Hey, I started this not knowing what reverse logistics even is." The two young ladies who helped me edit the book, you know, initially felt inadequate because they didn't know reverse. I'm like, no, you're actually the perfect target if you understand what it is that we do after reading it. That's the goal, and that's kind of the spirit of how we wrote the book, trying to take something complex, make it simple, brand agnostic, category agnostic, and just put things into a logical order. So,
Yeah.
it's going third.
That's excellent. Well, guys, we have just gone a little bit over, but this was pretty tight. This was pretty good. Thank you both. Just FYI for people that are still on the line here, if you do look under your materials tab in your weird interface, you'll see that there is a PDF of this presentation. There's also a link to the video that we showed early on. So I'm going to give everybody a couple of seconds before I shut down that if you are interested and find that you can download those assets before we close up. And that if you can't, you know, you can always contact me if you somehow are unable to download it or whatever. We'll make sure you get that. This will be posted up on our website and in our channel, you know, by tomorrow at the latest. So again, Sean, Rich, thank you guys for sharing circular logistics with us, and we will look forward to seeing you again down the line.
Thank you so much, Steve. Great to be with you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.